For in your time, we have the opportunity to move not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society.
Over the months and years that followed, Johnson promoted and the Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, Medicare, the Economic Opportunity Act, the Voting Rights Act. It was an incredible agenda for social change. But like Kennedy before him, Johnson was sure he would have to be tough abroad to justify liberal policies at home.
Lyndon Johnson grew to political maturity under Roosevelt and then Truman. And anybody who had been in public office, any Democrat who'd been in public office during the 40s, knew that there was a high price to pay for being soft on communism.
In January of 1964, General William Westmoreland was sent to Vietnam.
I told Mr. McNamara, I says, Mr. Secretary, we have a formidable task here. It's very difficult to see the end of it. I think it's going to try the patience of the American people, and I just wonder if they've got the staying power.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
Democrats were sure that Goldwater would turn Vietnam into a major campaign issue. So once again, domestic politics would have its impact on American foreign policy. President Johnson felt that he had to take a strong stand in Vietnam. On August 4th, 1964, he found the pretext. An American destroyer, he reported, had been attacked by North Vietnamese PT boats in international waters.
It is my duty to the American people to report that renewed hostile actions against United States ships on the high seas in the Gulf of Tonkin have today required me to order the military forces of the United States to take action in reply.
But there may have been much less to the Tonkin Gulf incident than President Johnson suggested. It was later revealed that the destroyer Maddox had been hit by a single bullet during the first attack. The second attack may never have happened at all. But Johnson wanted a congressional go-ahead for reprisal, and he got it.
And it was in that context that all but 2 members of the United States Senate and everyone in the House went along with this request to uphold the president's action. The other thing that was in my mind as a Democrat is that Goldwater, who was then about to launch his final bid for the presidency against Johnson, was running on a platform that Johnson needed to show some muscle out there in Vietnam.
The undeclared war was escalating. By 1965, the first combat troops, 3,500 Marines, came ashore to protect the airport at Da Nang. America was fighting to protect Vietnam from falling to the communists. And one of our major misperceptions about Vietnam was that China was directing the war from Beijing.
Over this war and all Asia is another reality. The deepening shadow of communist China. The rulers in Hanoi are urged on by Peking.
We, and I include myself in this, did not fully appreciate the historic antagonism between the ethnic Vietnamese and the Chinese. The Vietnamese didn't want the Chinese down there because the last time they came down, it took them 1,000 years to get them out.
And China itself was in the midst of Chairman Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, a national convulsion that weakened its position as an international power. It ripped apart the internal fabric of Chinese society. The streets were filled with chanting radicals, reverent Maoists, and the fanatical Red Guard.
It was a bad dream. It was unbelievable. You see, today, you were right. Tomorrow, you became the counter-revolutionary. So I saw the people use machine gun to shoot each other in the streets.
It only widened the gap that existed between the Soviets and the Chinese. But America still believed it was fighting the communist monolith.
I remember always Dean Rusk, who was Secretary of State at the time. when we spoke of Vietnam, we always repeated the bloc, not having even considered the fact that China and Russia at the time were beginning the worst enemies in the world.
And it would be years before the United States would take advantage of that split between the Chinese and the Soviet Union. The year, 1967. The establishment was under attack on all fronts.
Just one word.
Yes, sir.
Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Plastics.
When the music wasn't exalting the pleasures of drugs, it was exhorting people to protest.
I think there was a feeling of resolve. 67 was about grim business, and it was about people dying.
And our allies, who by now had anti-American protests in their streets, couldn't understand our fixation with Vietnam.
Country after country after country, we found they did not view the contest in Vietnam in the same light that we did. They did not see it as an expansion of Soviet or Chinese communism in Southeast Asia. They looked at it more as a civil war going on in Vietnam. To put it succinctly, they did not accept the Eisenhower domino theory that had been the basis of our participation.
But everything that had happened during the 1960s up to that point would seem tame in 1968. On college campuses, ghetto streets, in the Soviet bloc, and on the battlefields of Vietnam, 1968 would be the year it all came apart. And we'll be back with that in a moment.